everybody to take their places?
Do you want me to do this? I'll listen to South African voice.
No, it's okay. Okay. There are some seats over there if anybody is looking for a chair. Okay. If anyone's looking for a seat, there are a few more over this side of the room. If I could ask you to be upstanding for the Australian National Anthem. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's stage, let every stage advance Australia fair. My name's Jennifer Huppert, and my task here is to welcome you on behalf of your host this evening. I'd like to acknowledge our special guest this evening, our guest of honour, Mr. Isaac Herzog, Member of Knesset, Leader of the Opposition and incoming Chair of the Jewish Agency, who is here together with Mrs. Michal Herzog and their son Roy. And of course, our favourite ambassador, the Israeli Ambassador Mark Sofer, who is here with Mrs. Sarah Sofer. I also would like to acknowledge and welcome members of Victorian Parliament, Martin Foley and David Southwick, Glen Iris City Councillors, Mary Delahunty and Jamie Himes, community leaders, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on this cold winter's evening. The fact that we have a capacity crowd here at Beth Weizmann is testament to both the calibre of our guest speaker as well as the deep and strong connection between the Victorian Jewish community and the State of Israel. So thank you all for coming, and without further ado, I'll call on Mark Liebler AC, Chairman of AJAC, to introduce Ambassador Sofer and Mr. Herzog.
So, ladies and gentlemen, friends, let me also begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and paying my respects to their history, to their culture and custodianship of the land. I've been given the honour of introducing our two guest speakers this evening, Israel's Ambassador to Australia, Mark Sofer, and Opposition Leader Isaac, more popularly known as Buji Herzog, the newly elected head of the Jewish Agency. We're delighted that both our speakers are here with their wives this evening, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Sarah Sofer and Michal Herzog, and also to Buji and Michal's son, Roy. To keep the evening free and flowing, I'm going to introduce our speakers together, starting with our first speaker, Mark Sofer. Ambassador Sofer arrived in Australia at a time when our nation's always close relationship with Israel had never been closer. We had last year's reciprocal prime ministerial visits, including the first ever visit to Australia by a sitting Israeli Prime Minister. Trade and investment between Australia and Israel continues to grow as our countries continue to discover and take advantage of how much we can achieve through collaboration. I've known Mark Sofer for some years and can say from personal experience that the special relationship between Australia and Israel has been duly and appropriately recognised with the appointment of such a skilled and talented senior diplomat. I know the Ambassador would agree that our second speaker this evening, Isaac Herzog, is one of the most distinguished Israelis ever to visit Australia. Now, we all know that while Israel doesn't have a royal family, the fact is that the Herzog family comes pretty close. Buji's grandfather, Rabbi Yitzchak Halevi Herzog, was the first chief rabbi of Israel. His grandmother, Sarah Herzog, was, among many other accomplishments, the founder of world emunah. His uncle, Abba Eban, served as Israel's foreign minister. And another uncle, Dr. Yaakov Herzog, had a brilliant mind which he put to good use as Director General of the Prime Minister's Office and as an esteemed diplomat. But it is Bush's late father, Chaim Herzog, Israel's sixth president, who I can speak of from the heart. Chaim Herzog is said to have crammed at least half a dozen careers into his rich life. Before entering politics, he spent more than 20 years in the military and also founded one of Israel's most prestigious law firms, Herzog, Fox and Ne'eman. I remember Chaim Herzog giving me a lift to my first meeting as a delegate to the World Zionist Congress in 1972, in what I see in my mind's eye as a very little car. Obviously, this was well before he assumed office as president. He had a much bigger car after that. I frequently met with President Chaim Herzog when I travelled to Israel over the years, but my proudest and most vivid memory of Chaim Herzog as president is when he made his state visit to Australia in 1988. I was president of the Zionist Federation of Australia at the time, and the visit took place pretty much immediately after the Australian Parliament had unanimously backed a motion calling on the United Nations to rescind its infamous Resolution 3379 equating Zionism with racism. Chaim Herzog, who as Israel's ambassador to the UN in 1975 had famously ripped the resolution into half, was effusive in his gratitude to Australia. I relate those memories because they go some way to explaining the resonance and the joy I feel to be introducing another extraordinarily accomplished member of the Herzog dynasty this afternoon. Of course, we are also delighted to have Bush's wife, Michal Herzog, with us here. Michal is a criminal lawyer by training and heavily involved in various philanthropic activities. She is a seriously accomplished person in her own right. If I recounted Bush's CV in full, my speech would be much, much longer than his, so I'm going to limit myself to a few highlights. After an eminent legal career at Herzog, Fox and Ne'eman, it was perhaps inevitable that Bushi Herzog would move into politics, where he served as special advisor to Yitzhak Rabin, to Shimon Peres and Ehud Barak, before being elected to the Knesset in 2003. In 2005, when the Labor Party joined the Sharon government, Boogie was elected appointed Minister of Housing and Construction. He had also served as Minister of Welfare and Social Services and Minister for the Diaspora Society and Fight Against Anti-Semitism. In 2013, Bushi was elected leader of the Labor Party, a position which he held until July 2017. As his successor, Avi Gabay, is not currently a Knesset member, Bushi remains Israel's official opposition leader. And of course, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, Bushi will take on a new, even more challenging role as head of the Jewish Agency. And I'd like to say that it was a huge honour for me to be part of the 10-person nominating committee that recommended Bushi for the position. And let me assure you that he was head and shoulders above any of the other candidates, all of them very able people. Something I didn't know, but as Greer Cashman pointed out in the Jerusalem Post last week, Bushi is a second-generation representative of his family at the Jewish Agency on both sides of the family. When in preparation of the State in Waiting, the Jewish Agency established a school for diplomats, Bouzy's mother, Ora Herzog, was in the very first class. And at the time, his father, Chaim Herzog, was head of the Jewish Agency's security division. Ora was amongst 44 people wounded by the explosion of a car bomb in the courtyard of the Jewish Agency compound on March 11, 1948. In effect, I believe that Bouzy has been preparing for this new role for most of his life. Certainly his time living in the United States while his father served as ambassador to the UN exposed him to a large Jewish community living outside of Israel. At this critical time in the history of relations between Israel and the Jewish diaspora, I simply cannot imagine anyone with more suitable experience and skills, political, diplomatic, and human. I know everyone is very much looking forward to hearing from Bouzy, but can I first ask you all to join me in giving a warm welcome to Ambassador Mark Sofer.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. It's always wonderful to listen to. I could every word you said about Bouzy and Michal, I actually subscribe to in every way. I think the luck of the people in the room today is that they haven't come to hear me, but they've come to hear the real star, who really is actually a star in every way. I've been one of the few lucky ones, or maybe many lucky ones, that I've known Yitzhak or Bouzy Herzog for well over 30 years. Each of our meetings together has been fascinating. I won't go into all the myriad of stories I have, but I say that after everything that Mark mentioned, all of which is true, there's one additional thing I would like to add, and that is above all, for me it's above all, he's a mensch, a real mensch. And that is, I would say that's not, I almost said that's not all that common in Israeli politics, but I'm supposed to be a diplomat, and I actually like my job. I will just say, really, not to hold you back, I want to say a small story which will call for argument's sake. We'll say it's true, and hopefully will illustrate a little bit what I want to, why Bouzy is here, why Yitzhak is here today. And some of you may have heard this story. The Israel Philharmonic was supposed to be coming to Melbourne. And they were going to be playing the Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. They came to Melbourne, and one of the heads of the major companies here was invited to the concert. Schubert's Unfinished couldn't go. So he said to called in his number 2, and he said, listen, come here. You're going to go to the concert instead of me. The guy said, I've never been to a concert in my entire life. I'm going to go to a concert right now. Okay, he said, it's an order. You're going to go to hear the Israel Philharmonic playing Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. Guy went to the concert. The next day, boss calls him in. He says, okay, what was it like? He said, boss, I'll tell you the honest truth. I went there. It was the first concert I ever been to. But I thought you might like to hear. And I've written some notes. Pulls it out of his pocket. Some notes. It's okay. The first movement, he said, had too many violins. No reason to have 14 violins in the first movement. You could certainly have done with 10. The second movement, he said, they repeated the last bar a few times. What's the point of repeating a bar a few times? Once is enough. And also, he said, between the second and the third movement, there was a break. People coughed. Why break? Go straight from the second to the third. And he said, boss, I tell you the honest truth, if Schubert would have listened to what I had to say, he would have finished the symphony. Now, why is that, like in every Jewish story, it's a mashal and a nimshal. There is a story and there is a parable to the story. The story is, of course, as we look at the relations between Israel and Australia, we really do have a beautiful work of art. Mark mentioned it, and we heard it before, that the relationship is really on a pedestal in every way. And that's no small reason due to the fact that the Jewish community here, and you'll hear that more from Buji in a moment, to which I really subscribe every word to, is really unique in every way, and I won't go further than that because it's a fact, and Kol HaMosif Gorea, whoever adds to that fact will just detract from it. It is unique in every way. But it's unfinished. It's a work in progress. A work and relationship between two countries is always going to be a work in progress. There will always be difficulties, things that need to be tackled, things that one can make better. And that really is why we really were, Sarah and I, proud to invite Buji and Michal to Australia. It turned out in the end that there were two reasons. At first there was one and then it molded into two. The first reason was that we thought that despite the excellent, and I say this honestly, the excellent relationship we have with much of the leadership of the Labour Party, and I don't get involved in politics here in any shape, form, term, or way whatsoever. It's always good to have interlocution, to keep on the discussion going, to keep moving, to keep the activity at the highest level on all levels of society. But then, as we were planning, as we were talking about the trip, as we were arranging with the highest echelons of the political hierarchy here in Australia, Buji went ahead and got elected as the head of the Jewish agency. You know, sort of didn't ruin the visit, but changed the emphasis in every way. And so we did change the emphasis, and I must say one thing about him. He's going to be very angry at this, but I'm going to say one thing about it. Everything we said that we think you should do, and some of the things we said we think you shouldn't do, he said yes to everything. Every single meeting, every single second, from day 1 to day 5, he said yes to, including most of the stuff we said, don't bother. He said, yes, I'm going to. Of course, afterwards he got angry with me. Why did you do so much? But I'm used to that. The fact of the matter is that on every single meeting we've been through, and as I say, we've been through the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, and we've been to the head of the Labour Party, and Penny Wong made a dinner for him yesterday, and Richard Marles, and the trade unions, and we can go on and on and on. This is just in a day and a half or 2 days. Really, I can say in 36 years of the Foreign Service, which I've been in the Foreign Service, I cannot remember a visit which surpassed in expectation and the realization of expectation a visit of this nature. And I say that not because I have a lot of respect and honor for Buji, but I think that really this is a unique visit. He is a unique person. And what we will see from now on in the Jewish world is hopefully, inshallah, I almost said, hopefully, a new world, something which will bring more and more the Jewish people together, as you've tried to do with Israeli society and the relations with our neighbours. So thank you very much indeed, everybody. Sorry if I spoke for too long. And now the star.
You know, after all the expectations, that have been bestowed on me, only Allah can help here, right? Okay, so it's really a true honor and pleasure to be a guest of all of the major organizations of the Melbourne Jewish community. I'm really honored and grateful and moved by this incredible reception. And me, my wife Michal, my son Roy, and of course our excellent ambassador and Mrs. Sarah Sofer, we're all very appreciative of this wonderful reception. I have to say a word about the ambassador. He's outstanding. I can say firmly on behalf of the entire opposition of the State of Israel, we commend the Prime Minister for this selection. He's the best. And he thought he's going to, you know, him and Sarah, they'll have a nice service here, not too much work, believe me. He's killing me and I'm killing him. All is well. Now, I must say that the reception by the political echelon has been outstanding. Indeed, we met with Prime Minister Turnbull and Foreign Minister Bishop. On the day, they took a very impressive moral resolution preventing fungibility of funds to terrorists' families in the Palestinian Authority, and I commended them on this, and I think it's an outstanding resolution. We also had, Michal and I, we have very friendly relations with opposition leader and labor leader Bill Shorten, whom I met, and we met in Israel a couple of times already, and we had a terrific meeting with him, as well as later on the event led by Penny Wang, Shadow Foreign Minister. I'm always impressed. I was here 10 years ago, marking 60th anniversary for the State of Israel in Melbourne, in a major event with Prime Minister Kevin Rudd at the time. And I'm always impressed by the fact that on both sides of the aisle, Israel is so respected and appreciated. And yet, as was mentioned by Mark, there are places and quarters and groups that we need to meet with and talk to and convince and make clear that resolutions that are unilateral and adverse to the whole notion of peace should not be taken in any form, in political forums. And that was the initial idea of me coming here, as Mark requested, and leaders of the Jewish community. But as I stand here now, and I wear two hats, I identify three major challenges. And Mark Liebler, who's a great friend, actually almost in many ways a mentor of mine, years and years already, in the Jewish world, in Jewish politics, in worldly politics, and in Australian life and politics, he mentioned the fact that my mother was heavily wounded in the Jewish Agency building, the same building that I will be sitting in from 1st August. And it's quite remarkable for me, because Dad always mentioned two events where he told me, listen, I've seen many things in life. My father, you know, served in World War II in the British Army. He landed in Normandy. He crossed the Rhine. He liberated Bergen-Belsen. Until today, I meet Holocaust survivors who remember him as one of the first entering into the camp. And he caught Heinrich Himmler. And yet, he mentioned to me two events. One was the blowing up of the Jewish Agency building, where he walked into the building. The building was blown up by the first suicide bomber, a Palestinian who stole the American consul's car, filled it with explosives, got underneath the building in order to kill Ben-Gurion. And Dad walked in and saw my mother. They were just newlyweds under the rubble. She lost her conscience and she was hospitalized for weeks. And he always told me, look, I take things in proportion. You know, we Israelis, and many of you are so much involved in Israel, we react in hysteria for anything that happens in the country. But the truth is, those who were there take things in proportion. The other event, it was in the King David Hotel. At the moment the state was declared, they were not sitting and having coffee. They were in battle in the King David Hotel. My dad was leading a group of soldiers fighting Jordanian military. He depicted that moment. The place was, as night was setting in Jerusalem, everything was dark as possibly dark could be. There were wounded and casualties, and he then negotiated a truce with the French consul. When next time you're in the King David, look at the building nearby in the garden, you'll see the French consul's building. And that always depicted the King David as a ghost place, totally a derelict. And he always said, you see, and now look back and see where we're at. And I think that's how we need to judge Israel. 70 years to the creation of this wondrous nation, this fantastic phoenix that got out of the ashes of the Holocaust, and with the greatness of the Zionist movement, there's so much to be proud of. So much to be proud of. And it was really a great Australian contribution that gave us a lot for our independence. I mentioned Doc Everett constantly for a long time, and definitely in this visit, because Doc Everett was there at the decision that Australia said yes. And not only that, he was the one who coordinated the results of the special committee that had to bring the resolution 181 to a vote. Now, Doc Everett was a very close friend of my late uncle, Abba Iban. because Abba Eban, as you remember, was the first Israeli ambassador or emissary to the United Nations, and they had a huge affinity. And my late Aunt Susie was a great lady in her own right. I can, as a personal story, a few years ago, I told her, Auntie, I'm meeting an Australian politician, his name is Abbott. Tony Abbott. She says, no, you mean Doc Abbott. In Hebrew, it's the same. So that's how I remember the name Doc Abbott. And I read a lot, and I think that really Australia's contribution to the Zionist enterprise from 1917 onwards is something that we have to be really proud and appreciative of, and it symbolizes the unique relationship between our nations and the moral clarity of your leadership throughout as it pertains to Israel's independence, strength, and security. So the three major challenges that we face, and I'll say it in a nutshell. One is the topic that always looms above, Israel's safety, security, its relations with its neighbors. I can just say that recent developments have been quite dramatic in the sense that because of the Iranian nuclear deal and because of the Iranian infiltration in the region, which is horrendous and dangerous, it has an immediate bearing on all of our neighboring states, or our moderate Arab states, who 50 years ago wanted to annihilate us, who still vote against us, but underneath the surface are partners with us on an abundance of issues and items, who share a convergence of interests with us on issues of regional security, who would like to move on peace between us and the Palestinians, and I'm talking about Egypt and Jordan and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and an abundance of countries and states. And this is a huge move, unbelievable move, led by a young group of leaders of the region who have less of an Israel complex, who realize that Israel is the only stable element in the region and strong, and would like to cooperate with us further. Naturally, they would like progress between us and the Palestinians so that there could be peace in the future. And they'd like to see the culmination by a two-state solution. And part of the discourse, and from now on when you read and hear, you should understand this is where the political give and take is taking place right now. Of course, part of it has to do with Gaza as a major challenge to resolve, or at least open up, and has to do with the fact that the two major superpowers, the United States and Russia, are heavily involved in the region. Whilst Russia has gone in big time into Syria, which is, I would say, a very major development, the Americans wanted, or still would like, to pull out more from the region. However, the Americans are the ones who would like to deliver the Arab nations of the region. So this is where we are at right now. We should strive for peace. We should maintain our security as the primate consideration in any decision-making process. We should work together with the United States and with our allies. And we should bring the Arab nations into the room so that they could say to us, you will get your security, and say to the Palestinians, you will get your state. The second major issue, of course, is something that you're very much aware of, is the changing nature of Israeli society. We have a great story to tell as our society changes. Our society, as our president Reuven Rivlin says, is composed of 4 tribes that have to lead a nation together and believe in the great cause of Israel as a democratic Jewish state. And that meaning that we have to attend to veteran Israelis, to religious Israelis, to Haredi Israelis. By the way, Michal, my wife, is heavily involved in that social change, which is revolutionary. And the Arab communities, here Arab citizens and non-Jewish citizens of Israel. Together we have to carry the torch from generation to generation and realize that under the enkindlement of the Zionist idea of a nation state of the Jewish people, we should be able to have both of that as the key element of our being and identity, as well as the multifaceted nature, multicultural nature of our society. And here, of course, I think you have a lot to contribute. Australia is a as an impressive society of various groups in society, and you're also dealing with pains of the past and questions of identity, and we have a lot to share with that. And you, as the incredible Jewish community of Australia, are the bridge towards that cause. And finally, as I assumed the position of the chairman of the Jewish Agency, I would say I took it upon myself because I have a huge passion for the Jewish people and their well-being. We are in a unique nation among the family of nations. We're about 14 million. We're 6 million in Israel. We have a couple of millions in the United States. And we're at a critical juncture as to our future and fate on two accounts. One, how do we prevent divisiveness and split in the Jewish world? And two, how do we maintain the centrality of Israel as the innate being of Jews around the world? Something which is obvious, by the way, to most Jews in Australia, which is a unique Jewish community, incomparable to any other community around the world. And you saw it in the researchers recently, you saw it in the incredible mobilization of your young generation, in their involvement in Jewish life, in their love of Israel, in the fact that whilst you're as far as possible, you're as close as ever. Whilst other Jewish communities are tormented and debating and asking questions on many issues of this nature, what I call Jerusalem and Babylon. Babylon means most predominantly the Jewish community in the United States. And the fact is that whilst Israel is a secular state which is controlled, I would say, religiously by the Orthodox establishment and Orthodox practice, in the United States, the Jewish community is predominantly Reform and conservative. And how do you bridge two different perceptions or three different perceptions of Judaism? And how, in addition to that, is in light of ongoing erosion that has been instigated against us day in, day out by BDS elements and by anti-Israel forces for a long, long time, how do you preserve not only the centrality of Israel, but the love of Israel? The first thing I heard in the first day I went to study my new position was that in one of the major Jewish federations in the United States, when they're discussing the mission statement of the community, the issue love of Israel was taken off the chart by the youngsters. And the question is why? And we have to deal with that. So we have enormous challenges to bridge the gaps, to unite our people, to make sure that the incredible platform of the Jewish Agency, which is a global partnership between the Jewish community and the State of Israel, and is a very strong organization, has to be stronger. And you have the Shlichim here and the Netzigim here, and you know what they're doing day in, day out, in order to preserve all these objectives and actually achieve them. But that's going against many tides, and we have to answer on many questions as well. And we have to delve into it, and we have to work together. And I think the example which is set here in Australia and here in Melbourne is something worth preserving as much as possible, maintaining, continuing. And you can see me as a very strong ally and partner of the Australian Jewish community and the Melbourne Jewish community, wherever I am, definitely in the capacity of chairman of the Jewish Agency. So I would like to conclude, before I open the floor for questions and answers and issues that interest you on any topic of the day, because I touched briefly and superficially on many issues, so that I would encourage you to ask, I would like to conclude by expressing my enormous gratitude by telling you that it requires hard work, and what gave me a lot of comfort is the fact that I was congratulated by the rabbis, the leading rabbis of all the Jewish streams, and I told all of them, you guys are going to work hard so that we find compromises and solutions, and we open the gates, and we accept people who want to join our people as much as possible, and we work together in order to lower the friction and the tension. And I was happy that 2 days ago, the Knesset all of a sudden, because of a whole wave which we encouraged, overwhelmingly took a technical step, but it was a clear message to the diaspora Jews, yes, we will try to move the solution in the Kotel as well. So I hope, this is important, so I hope that together we will continue the great saga of the State of Israel to make it so that we can ensure that our next generations will enjoy the same respect and nachat that we all enjoy from the State of Israel, each and every one according to his personal experiences. Toda Rabba, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, honoured guests, it's my great pleasure to facilitate the Q&A session in my capacity as President of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry. The ECAJ, together with our partner organisations, delighted to welcome Mr Herzog to Australia. As our country's peak representative body for the Australian Jewish community and the Australian affiliate of the World Jewish Congress, we see supporting the State of Israel and strengthening the bonds between the Jewish state and the Jewish diaspora as central to our aims. That is why, since the establishment of the State of Israel, the ECAJ has led efforts to establish and then maintain bipartisan support for Israel in Australian politics. So to welcome the current leader of the Israeli opposition and the future chairman of the Jewish Agency to our shores is a tremendous honour. Before we go to the floor for questions, I'd like to exercise the moderator's prerogative and ask you the first question, if I may. Yitzhak, Israel was founded on socialist ideals with the kibbutzim and the histradut playing a central role in all aspects of the state. It had a female prime minister long before the world had heard of Margaret Thatcher or Julia Gillard. Today, it is a global leader in environmental conservation. Yet in spite of all of this, around the world and here in Australia, we are fighting an uphill battle to win the support of progressives. Why is this so? And what can we do, in your view, to build genuine, lasting support for Israel among the left?
Thank you. It's a very, very good question. Thank you, Anton, for this question. It's part of the dilemma or the conflict or the tension that we live in. I kept on saying to many friends here, and I've been actually keeping in touch with many, many friends from the liberal, and not liberal is the wrong term. How did you say it? Progressive forces here, as well as around the world. We, first of all, are a progressive nation on many counts. We have our own debates within our society, which, if you look at it rationally, are happening all over the world. Look at the change in Europe. All of a sudden, there's a shift to the center-right or to the right. You see it in the United States, you see it in South America, and you see it definitely in Israel. And by the way, I can say legitimately, I ran against Benjamin Netanyahu in 2015. I formed a Zionist union with Tzipi Livni as I led Labour, and we gave a lot of hope to many people. We ran close, I got very close, but at the end, the people of Israel democratically opted to vote for Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, that's not only credit to our society for deciding who they want to lead their nation, but also I can say, interestingly and intriguingly, that I could understand where it came from. I was asked in dozens of rallies and events with hundreds and thousands of people, by people of my own camp, can you ensure security to our families if you want a Palestinian state? Can you ensure that the Palestinian state 5 minutes from Kfar Saba will not be a launching pad for terror? Now that's legit. And I tell it to everybody who criticizes Israel. We took steps for peace that no other nation took. We're a tiny nation in terms of geographics. And every time we took them, we got terror. I have full answers to that effect, and I can go into it, what needs to be done and how, etc. But nobody can blame us without understanding the facts. And I told it to many Australians as well, and liberal forces. You guys are liberal forces. You want to, progressive forces. You want to lead the nation in your own countries. Then remember that when you're in the helm, you'll have to fight terror with no mercy. And when you fight terror with no mercy, there are people who translate it as if it is something that violates human rights or violates progressive ideas. But the whole notion of progressive ideas is to use law and order and force and moral clarity and preserve a robust, thriving nation while preserving all of that. Look at your laws, for example, here. Look at laws in many other countries. At the end, the law is aimed to prevent terror. And when you use force to prevent terror, unfortunately, sometimes there are mistakes, but that's not something the nation wants to do. And then for this, we have adjudication and investigation. We have the strongest Supreme Court, one of the most strongest and progressive Supreme Courts on earth. We have one of the most vibrant and aggressive parliaments on earth. In my opposition, we have Muslim Brotherhood, which is not allowed anywhere in the world, let alone in the countries near us. And then we are educated by academics from the extreme left who say that we are undemocratic. So these are the things that need to be mentioned. We have a great story to tell. We are a nation who contributes enormously to the well-being of humanity. We are progressives, and I led, and I am a very important leader in the movement that established the State of Israel on the basis of socialism and equality and redistribution of wealth and issues that are tackled by world over. But unfortunately, we live in a very cruel area. In that area, just north of us, a leader butchered 700,000 innocent people of his own people, and the world stood idly by just in the last few years. And therefore, they are the last people to tell us what to do when that happens. Namely, the world order of post-World War II that had to do with fighting crimes against humanity and genocide, etc., has collapsed because political interest in the international bodies. And that is why we have to be tough on terror and preserve security and extend our hands for peace and preserve our liberal or progressive nature as a democracy that has one of the farthest free speeches, right of demonstration, and strong independent legal system that gives no mercy to its leaders, as you know all too well. Please, next question.
So we have a couple of roaming mics, so if you raise your hand, we'll have the mic come over to you, and I ask you to announce your name and then ask your question of Yitzhak. So where can I start the bidding?
Here, the woman
at the back.
Meanwhile, I want to acknowledge the presence of some members of parliament here who are here with us from your political echelons, and I want to thank each and every one of them. I see my friend David here and his wife Haley. Thank you all. Mike Foley. Martin Foley. And thank you all for being here. Please.
Can you tell us what's the situation with the Arab Street? You know, you talked about the Arab countries and the states that are becoming more close to Israel, but what about the Arab Street in Egypt or other countries?
Okay, so the Arab Street is simply it's a summarization of the fact that the Arab rulers cannot reign or control. And that started, that was brought to bear in the Arab Spring of early 2011. Actually, the Arab states revolted. If you look at it carefully, monarchies, though, have been sustainable right now and quite strong, whilst the others, the republics, supposedly collapsed. If you look around, Libya, for example, is a total mess. Of course, Yemen is a total mess. And these are examples of how the revolutions led to a collapse of the system, of orderly system of governance, as well as Syria, which I mentioned already. But the Arab Street is varied. The Islamic world and the Arab world is undergoing tremendous transformation. It could go to two different conflicting directions. One is it can go into the extreme of fanaticism. Namely, you have the Shias, the Iranian Shias predominantly. This we know. They're right now the most radical, dangerous element in the region. But you also had Al-Qaeda and you had ISIL, as dangerous as the others are. So jihadists against Shias is a very dangerous cocktail. However, when I said that moderate Arab leaders are moving towards reconciliation with Israel in various degrees, I mean that there are young leaders who want to lead the change. One of these leaders is Mohammed bin Salman, the new heir apparent of Saudi Arabia, the crown prince, who has not only made change in rhetoric or in little signals such as enabling Air India to fly over Saudi Arabia to Israel, but has also made huge change by the fact that he allowed women, for example, to start driving in Saudi Arabia. And something that may look to you minuscule, but it's huge. It's a watershed. And therefore, we are looking at those leaders. For example, Mohammed bin Zayed, who's the crown prince of the Emirates, who's actually one of the biggest forces of progressive Arab change, and a great ally of Australia as well. And we're looking at all of these players to see whether they can deliver change. This is the innate conflict within the Muslim society, to move to Islamic extremism or to something else. We don't know, and we'll have to wait. And meanwhile, we live in a tumultuous region, but a changing region. And if we speak about Iran, which is interesting, here's another street. It is clear that the Iranian street is extremely unhappy with its regime. You saw riots in recent days, including last night's riot calling for the return of the Shah. But, and by the way, Iran is a very well web-oriented country, one of the most active nations on the web. So that's very strong there. However, we know what it means. They all have traumas from Syria, and that actually, I think, mentally blocks the people from exploding and changing the regime. Please.
Sam.
Just state your name and, of course, your capacity, although we met, but so the people know who you are.
Sam Saltzman, I'm Zionist Federation Executive and also on the ECAJ. In your role as a parliamentary leader of the Zionist Union, you're closely involved with the foreign policy of the progressive movements in Europe in particular. How do you view the current situation that exists in Britain, where possibly the future leader of the country is likely to be Mr. Jeremy Corbyn, who's expressed views of hatred.
Let's daven
elsewhere. Obviously contains dark dangers for the future. What do you believe should be the role of the Israel Labour Party and the Zionist Union in particular, globally, to counter those horrific trends of anti-Semitism in those progressive societies?
Thanks, Sam. We have been talking to all our sister parties, and you can't compare Germany to France to Britain. In Britain, it's a unique phenomenon whereby the extreme streak of the school of thought of socialism has taken over that party. And I don't intend to intervene in that party. I'm only going to say two things. I invited Jeremy Corbyn to Israel to visit Yad Vashem, and he never replied 2 years ago. And in light of recent events in the party, my successor, Avi Gabay, announced cutting off any ties with him personally. However, with the party, there is an enormous group called Labour Friends of Israel, which is very impressive. It parallels the incredible group of members of parliament here as well who support Israel. It's a very passionate group, always been led by top UK leaders. And they have well over 120 members. I will attend the annual event in November, which is kind of, I would say, a snub to Corbyn. They're very supportive, and it's a fight within the party. It's a unique case. In other parties, there are debates and questions asked, and they come to visit Israel, and we have discussions, and we tell them exactly where we're at and the things that I've just mentioned. So I wouldn't say that everything is the same. You know, in Romania, for example, the Socialist Party has won with 50%. That's the first nation that demanded to move the first government, actually, that demanded to move the embassy to Jerusalem and to follow suit after President Trump's decision. The president of the nation, who is from the opposite party, center-right, is the one who blocked that resolution. It led to an enormous political crisis and rift now in Romania. But that's just an example that you can't categorize all movements with the same viewpoint. Please.
Yes, Alex. Thank you very much. Firstly, I just wanted to say, my name's Alex, I'm an active member of the community here. I just wanted to say that I think my initial Zionism comes from when I was a little school kid holding a flag when your father came into our school, when he visited our school, and I think I was one of the kids that...
Thank you. I receive a lot of those messages, and it's really moving for me.
And ever since then I've been following his career and now your career, and so it's a great honor to speak to you.
Thank you.
You talked about one of your goals as Jewish Agency head is to bring cohesion between the Orthodox and the conservative in America. I wanted to ask you about, if you can elaborate a bit on that, and also to talk about the grip of the rabbinical courts in Israel and some of the relations with the secular society in Israel, and how you intend, if at all, to overcome some of those rifts.
Well, as you know, and I assume I'm speaking to people who really know Israel well, because you're there, you have family there, you read, and you're heavily involved. I know that. You are one of the most involved communities on earth. And the truth of the matter is that in Israel, it's a lot of gray areas. It's not that you can categorize each tribe and say it's detached from the rest. If Michal would stand here, and if you're interested on issues of Haredim, she would tell you what a revolution goes on there. And the overlap between the various communities is huge. So what people like to perceive superficially in order to create dramas is totally different from when you live together. Roy spent a year now in a mechina in the Arava, and you guys are heavily involved with a partnership with the Arava, Center Arava, in the mechina. It was a religious and secular mechina of kids from religious and non-religious homes, and there was nothing more beautiful and impressive and touching the heart than to see those young kids bond together and think about, you know, how to be better Israelis. So, unfortunately, what I see in the diaspora when Jews sit together from all streams, and I showed it to people in Israel, I showed them a group of 1,000 rabbis from all streams together at the AIPAC conference back in March, and I took this movie and I showed it to rabbis in Israel, and I said to them, for heaven's sake, sit down in a room and start talking to each other. Don't ban. My grandfather never banned anybody as chief rabbi. On the contrary, one of his closest friends on earth was Professor Shaul Lieberman, who was a giant in the Talmud Yerushalmi, who was the head of the Jewish Theological Seminary of the conservative movement, which I know has a different name here, Masorti movement. Okay, good. I'm learning slowly. So people need to speak to each other and discourse and speak theologically. The idea of the alternative Kotel was something which I devised as cabinet secretary back in 1999. I was under the government of Ehud Barak. We had huge riots in the Kotel. People simply seem to forget or not know. And it took me a year to come with a solution, a compromise, where I got the blessing of Rav Ovadia Yosef, the real leader of Orthodox Jewry, and the Reform and Conservative movements in Robinson's Arch near the Kotel. But now, in modern day and age, when you have extreme people with on the web and Twitter, etc., they can tilt the balance of discussion, whilst mainstream people and most of the silent majority would like to live together. And actually a poll which came out today says Israelis would like as much as possible to compromise and live and let live with all the streams of Judaism. And I think this gives me a certain, I would say, credit to start moving towards that direction. I'm not intending to be theological. I'm not a rabbi. I want to go above that and said, as I said from day one in the Board of Governors of the Jewish Agency, for me, every Jew is a Jew, no matter what he practices and how he lives.
Maybe is there questions on that side of the auditorium?
Yeah, here, out there.
We'll come back.
And I'll be happy to see more women asking questions too.
Thanks very much for a very inspiring.
And you are?
I'm Yochai Glick, dual Australian Israeli citizen. There's an apparent deterioration in Israel of the moral ticker, corruption. We hear stories, not just for politics, ex-president in jail, ex-prime minister, ex-minister who came out of jail is now sitting in parliament and on the commercial tenders. Is this just apparent? Is it fake news? And if it isn't, what's the reason?
I'll say the following. When you read the Bible, you see it all there. And human beings don't change. And it says, shochad lo tikach. And it says many other things. Unfortunately, we have ailments in our system, but the fact that our legal system has thrown a president to jail and a prime minister to jail is actually credit to our independent legal system, which is forceful and not willing to compromise. Now, it's not easy. Believe me, you know the news from Israel. You know what I'm talking about. You know that leaders, when they're in such a situation, take hard steps and fight the institutionalized adjudication system. But I would not say that the nation as such is corrupt. I really, sincerely say that. I think, all in all, a lot of the Israeli leaders are people who are there because they have a willpower and passion to serve the nation. And you have corruption, unfortunately, and it's a worldwide phenomenon. Not that I justify it in any way, under no circumstances, but there is a big demand in Israel for cleanliness of government, and you see improvement in many places. We have politics is something dirty. At times, it's perceived as dirty, and you see all the movies and films about politics. Whatever you see in politics, it's all correct. But it doesn't mean that the system and what you educate the people is for corruption. On the contrary, I think there is a major improvement in many quarters of life on transparency, on cleanliness, on arm's length, on equal tender, on many items. And therefore we should see it as I said, in a proportional manner. Naturally, it's the sexiest item, it's breaking news, it's what you get in the media, and sometimes the people are acquitted and found not guilty too. We have to remember that as well.
Hi, I'm Noah. So a couple of weeks ago, America...
Noah is from Australian Union of Jewish Students.
Yes. So recently America announced that they would be withdrawing from the UNHCR, and that reflects systemic issues within lots of international organisations to delegitimise the state of Israel. So
yeah,
I was wondering what your views are on both from Israel's perspective, but also diaspora Jewish communities, how we can, combat international movements such as BDS to delegitimise the state.
Look, BDS, there's UNHCR and there's BDS. UNHCR is one of the examples of how terrible the international institutions have gone. When Venezuela, Iran, and Syria lead the way. But I'm not sure, I would not withdraw from the UNHCR, I would give it a fight. That's my personal opinion, but the United States decided to pull out. Australia has gone in, is staying there alone. It's not simple and not easy. And, you know, I think the Australian moral position should be presented, and I think the world needs to present alternative cases and opinions that justify Israel in every quarter, in every place, in every forum. As for BDS, that's a major challenge. You have it also here on campus. There is enormous Israel hate. Actually, Mark Liebler beautifully mentioned my late father's illustrious speech at the UN back in 1975 defending Zionism against a resolution equating Zionism with racism. In fact, Bechol Dor Vador, unfortunately, in our generation, this is BDS. The whole undermining of the just cause of the Jewish people to have a nation state of their own, fully recognized by the international community. People are just brainwashed. There's a lot of hate. They don't want to listen. It's an organized campaign. I know the government of Israel focuses on it now, and the Jewish Agency actually focuses heavily on that. We even have a shaliach here of the Jewish Agency who's operating on campus, and whoever wants to meet him, he's here as well. Where are you? Yoav, where are you? Yoav's there. So if you guys want to help Yoav, and of course the whole team of the Jewish Agency, please do, because it's a very important cause. Thank you.
In the middle. And then we'll take one question at the back, and then we'll talk.
Rodi Gilmore, Radio 3 Triple. I'd like to take you back to Israel politics, now that you are leaving Israeli politics. And you were talking about changes. Where do you see the opposition or the Machaneh Tzionei can drive any change in the political culture of Israel? And just by the way, I want to continue what Alex said. I was working at Scopus Zilitan, and I remember your parents coming.
Thank you. So, you know, I'm not leaving Israeli politics, I'm leaving the Knesset. And actually, I think the training I got in Labour Party politics gives me ample capability in Jewish politics. And I think it will help me sustain and survive Jewish politics. Now, political change all overall in Israel can come by unity of forces. What I've done with Livni. Livni is a very formidable Israeli leader. We merged together and we led to an incredible result which got us very closely. I doubled the votes that came towards us from 213 to 215. I doubled them to well over 800,000. In order to win Israeli elections, you need over 1 million. And I would urge, and I've urged all the centrist bloc in Israel to go together. But you know, there's ego and there's considerations and there's no love lost, and it requires a lot of personal chemistry and ability to work together. My idea was that we need to align with further parties and forces. And by the way, I think it's important for Israeli politics and democracy that the pendulum tilts. But one would say in a nutshell that the Israeli political map is divided 60-40. It's about 60% center-right and 40% center-left. And in order to win, you need to have 11% more move towards your center-left bloc, which requires being in the center of the political map in order to win. And then the camp has to decide whether it wants to be righteous and holy and believing in whatever they want, but be tiny and loose, or they want to be pragmatic, as Labour was always, and from Ben Gurion onwards, because we want to lead the nation. Correctly you said, I'm leaving that, and I will focus entirely on helping and assisting and uniting the Jewish people as much as I can.
Thanks. Last question at the back. The gentleman with his hand up.
Yeah, he's been trying so much. He deserves it.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Jeff Lutschatz, and I'm involved in the executive of Bet Lochem here.
That's nice.
I just wanted to ask you, in your capacity as head of the Jewish Agency, it seems to me that there is a lot of moral confusion, not so much amongst the non-Jewish people, but amongst Jewish people. And it seems to me that a lot of the younger generation are morally confused in terms of the validity and the righteousness of the State of Israel. And so rather than dealing with those dilemmas, they go to more humanitarian issues, like, you know, helping poor in their countries or helping the Somalians, whatever it is. And it seems that not only is it the young, but it's also a lot of American Jewish organisations that don't quite know where they are in terms of Israel. And I just wanted to know how you were going to deal with that in terms of the Jewish Agency to convince them.
Thank you. So I want to say that it's not my intention to be judgmental in any way. On the contrary, anybody who wants to help Tikkun Olam is blessed. But I can say that people are unaware that, for instance, the Jewish Agency is now leading a project that was asked by a group of activists who want to change the world to have a special shelter for Syrian refugees in Saloniki. And many Israelis are involved in aiding the Syrians right now in Syria who are fleeing away from the battleground. And it's all legitimate and all good. And if people want to help other human beings wherever they are, it's a cause for pride which can bring us together. I would open the doors for any young Jew who wants to do good to do it through us, if possible. I can't deliver everything, but I think the fact that people are interested in doing good is fine. Once, previously, in previous generations, Israel was viewed as, I would say, the weaker, the one who needs a lot of help. Israel and the Israeli people still has enormous tasks ahead. For example, absorbing our brothers and sisters from the heartland of Africa, from Ethiopia, or the communities under duress all over the world, from Russia all the way to Venezuela, and even somebody wrote me now about Nicaragua. So there are many objectives. We have Aliyah of 30,000 people a year, which we have to take care of. There's no more noble cause than that. But I would say that part of the adjustment of the Jewish Agency or the Jewish leadership is to the fact that people are looking for other objectives and causes to take part in. And look around the room and you know how many people here are involved in so many noble causes for so many great institutions and organizations. That's fine with me. The last thing we need to do is be angry at each other. We need to work together. Because we have a huge, huge, huge task, national task, historical task that we need to serve together. So thank you all very, very much.
It is my pleasure this evening on behalf of the 5 host organisations, and I'm sure everyone in this room, to thank both of our speakers. Ambassador Mark Sofer, believe it or not, has only been with us about 9 months. I think sometimes he feels it's much longer, and we definitely feel that he has become part of our community. We are blown away by the talent, the expertise, and the amazing way in which he represents Israel within the wider Jewish community, within the political community, and the way he has taken our community to heart. Once again tonight, Mark, you have shown us why we know that we have a very high calibre ambassador and why we are very proud to call you our ambassador. We're also delighted to welcome Sarah here this evening, and we look forward to many more occasions over the next few years where you will both be with us. Our thanks go to the Embassy for the opportunity to welcome Isaac Herzog into our community. He comes to Australia at a very important time as the Labor Party moves towards its national conference, and all the reports that I've heard is that he has been an amazing emissary for Israel in all the groups where he has met, and in particular in his interactions with the Labor Party. And I think, having heard him tonight, we understand why. Your passion for the Jewish people and their well-being came through everything that you said. Your willingness to not resolve from any questions, to answer them fully and honestly, to set out the challenges that Israel faces, to educate us on them, and most importantly, to give us that feeling that you understand the Jewish people, and that you are committed to the Jewish people. I also have a memory from that trip in 1988 of your father. My mother, who had sat in a lounge room in Caulfield and listened to the United Nations vote and to the announcement of the state, was in tears as she sat at Temple Beth Israel, where your father officially opened, I'm not sure if it was the King David School or a new building for the King David School, and she said to me, "I never thought I would live to see a state visit by an Israeli president to Australia." That pride that she felt 30 years ago, we in the Australian Jewish community still feel for Israel. And when we have speakers of your calibre come to us, that pride is increased. Thank you for this evening. Thank you for everything you have done for Israeli politics as your time in Knesset. And thank you in advance for what we are sure will be an amazing new role as Chairman of the Jewish Agency as you continue the Jewish saga. Can I ask you to join us on stage together with Anton, Jennifer and Mark so that we can make a present... And Mark Liebler. Mark 1, Mark 2, I don't take any marks I can get.
I'll just throw a footy at you, you can get that mark.
The presentation we are making tonight is a book called Voices from the Melbourne Jewish Community, which is a book that was published through the Lamb Library of Australia and tells the stories of members of our community, both their experiences from the Shoah, others of their experiences growing up in Melbourne. So during that 23, 24, 25-hour flight, whatever it might be, hopefully you'll have a chance to
read it by heart. My grandfather, just tell you a story, my grandfather, Rabbi Herzog, met with President Truman in 1950 and gave him a Torah scroll. And President Truman said, "I always wanted one of these."
I invite you to be upstanding for the singing of Hatikva.
Have nothing to do with it.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Shireen.
Shireen, you're brilliant. I saw you writing this whole thing. She was sitting like this and everybody else was there.
Breakfast.